wasn't free, but I still believe in my freedom, so my mind can see.
My name's Mike Arnold, M-I-K-E-A-R-N-O-L-D. I wanted to go over a couple of preliminary things, just to answer some questions I've been getting constantly through email, and just to kind of save some time for everyone. I've had quite a few questions about Ammon's confinement while in custody, the tiny room he was in for 2 weeks, and the solitary confinement situation. So Ammon's been moved from solitary confinement to another section at the jail that will purportedly have more access to communication with his family and access to his attorneys. In the last 2 weeks, he's only allowed between 45 minutes to an hour at a time, and several times against jail policy, and likely accidentally, the attorney phone calls were interrupting with his ability in 45 minutes to an hour to clean up, shower, call his family, and then talk to me. And it's my understanding that that is jail policy, and they followed their jail policy, and so that was nothing out of the ordinary. Just the concern for public policy reasons is that really a good policy for 2 weeks for non-violent offender with accusations of no physical force and no criminal record? So that's just one concern for the community up here to consider. The next thing I want to address is Ammon's right to free speech while he's in jail. As you know, we received permission from the Multnomah County Jail to use our attorney telephone time and have the ability to record any statements he wishes to make and distribute it to the public. We've obviously advised him of his right to remain silent, and continues to be his goal to speak while in custody, to educate and continue on some of the attention that is brought to the matters that he was protesting. Of course, his words are by no way an endorsement by the jail or by our law firm. They're his words, and they're important to him and many people that believe in his words. There have been several commentators that have suggested that there shouldn't be a right to free speech, and someone in jail shouldn't be allowed to speak. And of course, you know, that's free speech too to say that, and that's okay, and that's a bad idea, and the marketplace of ideas should shout that idea down, because when you are in federal custody for a political protest or any federal crime that you're accused of, that should be the absolute time that you have the right to free speech. We're here today watching two First Amendment rights in action. I see before me several dozen people with cameras that are probably in the press and probably enjoying the right to free press in the First Amendment. At the same time, I'm enjoying the right to my free speech speaking to you now. Ammon tells us his goal is to continue to talk, and if you don't agree with his arguments, that's okay. He'll appreciate your feedback, but the answer is not to stop his speech. The answer is always, if you disagree with Ammon Bundy, is more speech, and let whatever idea prevails outcompete other ideas in the marketplace of ideas that is free speech. Next, I'd like to introduce some folks behind me. Lisa Casey, Ammon Bundy's co-counsel, behind me to my left. We've given a list of names to you, but these are representatives from the coalition of Western states. Ammon Bundy made a call for action for legislators from across the country, particularly across the West, to come and show interest in these issues. And the folks here with me today have answered Ammon's call, and there were other folks that answered Ammon's call that had to go back to their given legislative assemblies. We had a little change of plan. They were coming to speak here yesterday, but abruptly we changed our itinerary and headed to Burns, and the other folks that couldn't join us from the legislatures, they went home because Portland was inconvenient for some of them, especially the folks that were from Idaho. They went from Burns back to Boise. So I'll introduce now Michelle Fiore. She's present here from Clark County, Nevada. She represents in the Nevada State Assembly Ryan Bundy and Ammon and Ryan's father, Cliven Bundy. She's a well-known Republican. She's known to have an independent libertarian streak. She is well-known as an ardent supporter of the Second Amendment, but she's also pro-gay marriage and pro-legalization of marijuana. She's here today because she and her colleagues have answered Ammon's call to action, and I'll now give her the floor. This is a joint press conference. I just wanted to honor their sacrifice in making the trip, so I'm going to just turn it over to them and let Michelle talk to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So, you know, I made some notes while sitting in the courtroom, and I actually have a statement to read from Ammon Bundy, and the press will get a copy of that as well. But you know what I noticed? We're on federal property here, and before we start this, if you guys could just take a look over there at that guy with a gun. You see him? That statue? That speaks volumes to our Second Amendment. And I just want to make sure that people understand the Constitution, our freedom of speech, and our right to bear arms. And standing here on federal property and having that symbolic symbol is very telling. So before I get started with my comments, I would like to read a statement from Ammon. So I'm going to read the statement from Ammon since he is in jail and unable to be here now with you. These are Ammon's words. I would like to thank the hundreds of thousands of supporters across this great country who understand what is really going on. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for looking beyond the headlines and researching the truth. And most of all, thank you for your continual prayers. For several decades, federal agencies have been taking ranches, mines, properties, and forests all over the United States. They remove the rightful owners in the name of government and begin using the property for their own benefit. Through these actions, federal agencies have destroyed the economies of hundreds of counties, leaving the people with very little to survive on. Those who stand up to them, like the Hammonds and my father, Cliven Bundy, are prosecuted in federal court and thrown into prison. Most of these ranches, mines, properties were established well over 100 years ago, long before the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service were even thought of. The Constitution of the United States restricts federal government from owning mass amounts of land inside an established state. It also does not give authority for federal agencies to purchase land inside the states without permission from state legislatures. Federal agencies refuse to recognize the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. They openly and blatantly break the law and put the people's liberty at risk by doing so. This is why we made a hard stand at the refuge. Our statement is this: the land belongs to the people, not government. Government officials must follow the laws people have placed upon them. Liberty, by definition, is freedom from arbitrary or despotic government control. Let us learn from the lessons of the past. We must get our government in control and back to benefiting the people. If we can do this, we may prosper as a nation once again and pass freedom on to our children. With respect and love, Ammon Bundy. That was Ammon's statement. So I'm going to tell you guys why I'm here today. I made a promise. I made a promise to Sean and Sandy Anderson and David Fry and Jeff Panter that I wouldn't leave them alone as we go on to the next battleground. So their first stand was at the refuge, and our next battleground is in these courts. I'm also here today because an American, Ammon Bundy, and many others made a call to action. And these Americans are reaching out to their representatives asking for our help. I represent Americans. We are a nation of laws. We have to obey the laws, but the biggest key here is our government, our federal government, has to obey the laws as well. I truly believe that the refuge and the people that stood on the refuge are prisoners today because they exercise their political free speech. I haven't seen yet today any evidence of the federal government asking them to leave the refuge. No one has provided me with that evidence, written documentation whatsoever as of today before I stand before you. I ask our fellow Americans to unite and defend one another, to have compassion for each other and protect one another. Just as we stood up to the bullies in school, when the bullies picked on defenseless schoolmates of ours, we as Americans have to stand united and defend federal government, large government bullies as well. I'm going to close because I want to introduce some other legislators, but I'm going to close with a quote from Ammon Bundy, which I have personally endorsed this quote, and it's basically arm yourselves with ideas and arm yourselves with education. Agree and disagree and argue, but be free. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton right now, and she has a few words, and I will answer some questions after Shelley introduces another legislature.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Shelley Shelton. I am from Nevada also, in Las Vegas, and I want us all to just stop and think for a second. I want you to think for a second that there is a reason battle commanders make decisions based on what's happening on the front lines. Today, our ranchers, our loggers, they're the people on the front lines, and we need to listen to them. Our public lands are being taken, and this is not just something that's happening here in Oregon. This is happening throughout the United States, and this is a problem that needs to be addressed. We have tried this past session in Nevada, working with different people in different legislatures, to do this through the legislative process. And state ownership of these lands is not a radical concept. It has been disputed for decades, but now is the time to stop the bleeding of our resources and start using them at a state level and get the control of the lands back at state level. I'd also like to introduce Assemblyman John Moore, who is also from Nevada.
Thank you all folks for coming out. I'm Assemblyman John Moore from Las Vegas, Nevada, representing District 8. I'm here today, and I came up here because there, in my opinion, Mr. Finicum was murdered at the hands of the Oregon State Police and others, federal agents as well. This man was trying to surrender. It's quite obvious on the video that he was trying to surrender, but yet they chose violence and murder rather than to apprehend him. I've driven that route many times, and they had plenty of opportunity to apprehend him, if you will, for lack of a better term, or to question him anywhere along that route. But instead, they chose to employ an ambush. Now, I have 24 years in the military, special ops community. I'm a former Army Ranger. I know what an ambush is. And when I saw that video, that was clear-cut ambush. I've employed ambushes like that in foreign countries. I know what that's like. That man died at the hands of the Oregon State Police and federal agents, and he did not need to. That's why I'm here today, and that's why I came up here to try and prevent the further loss of life and harm to any other residents, whether they be in Oregon or Nevada or anywhere in this country. I will travel anywhere for that purpose. I think that should appall each and every one of us, that that kind of treatment can be done to an American citizen. As I stated earlier, I fought in combat. That is not what I fought in combat for, so that our own government can murder our own citizens. That deeply saddens me and troubles me. And I will do everything in my power to see that that does not happen to anyone else. Thank you. I'd like to turn it back over to Michelle.
Forget the spelling of your name.
John, John, Moore.
So we want to thank you for being here, and we have a long road to go. I think I'll be visiting Oregon to get through the process with these folks that are in prison here. I am available through email. Do you have any specific questions?
Sure, Ms. Fiore, do you advocate other armed actions such as happened in Harney County?
Okay, so when you say armed action, I just want to be crystal clear. Have you ever seen one of the people that were camping at the refuge point a firearm at anybody? Nope. Yes or no?
No, were they armed?
That's it.
They were armed. So
Doesn't matter.
There was a group of people that were armed.
Doesn't matter. There's a right to. Okay, so next question. Do you have a next? Do you have another question? I really want to reform our justice system. That's the big goal. You guys, I can't stress enough that we need justice reform. I am a conservative Republican from Las Vegas, Nevada, who sat on, in both my terms as an assemblywoman, on our Judiciary Committee. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or an Independent. We incarcerate too many people. The punishment is not fitting the penalty. The punishment, in Nevada, we fight for laws that, you know, criminal infractions should be civil violations. It's incredible the road we've gone down. As a legislator that writes laws and the laws that go through the process of our LCB and our Legal Counsel Bureau, those written words get convoluted and changed and amended and then passed, and then the judge has to decipher what we did in session. And sometimes it doesn't work out for our family and friends. And it's not okay to imprison people, and you know, it's okay to imprison folks that have crimes against other people. But we're talking about a bunch of cowboys camping in the middle of nowhere, bearing their rights to their firearms. That's what we're talking about.
So you feel they did nothing wrong?
It's not that I feel that they did nothing wrong. What I'm saying is they came here to defend the Hammonds, and the Hammonds are in prison right now, and they came here to basically go against the bully, which is the federal government. This is not first incident of the Bureau of Land Management taking people's properties. This is a behaved pattern, and I urge every one of you to look up all of the cases of the ranchers that have lost their property, including that refuge. I urge each and every one of you to find out what that refuge once upon a time was. It was owned by Oregon ranchers, okay? And the Hammonds are the last ones there. Any other questions?
If I take the word armed out, do you advocate similar actions as happened?
I advocate free, peaceful assemble, and that is exactly what happened.
Yes.
Nobody pointed a gun at anybody, except the police.
If the land should go back to the people who originally owned it, should it be returned to the Paiute?
Oh my, okay.
Well, I mean, no, I mean...
Why don't we just all go back to England in that case?
Well, no, but...
I mean, no, for real, really, you can't...
Well, I can make a statement about what Ammon has told me his feelings are about that. I might be inarticulate about this because I haven't done research and I just know what Ammon's expressed, but he has told me and others that he believes that the land should revert back to heirs of original homesteaders, or to the tribes, or to county or state governments. So I think with the refuge in mind, I can't really speak any further what his statement would be, but my interpretation is there would be nothing wrong with a Malheur State wildlife refuge under that analysis. That's all I know.
So he would like to figure out who the last owner was. If there's no trace of it, he would be fine with it going back to the tribe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that specifically because I don't know tribes versus state versus counties on how that works in this argument. But I know that they're wanting to research and get those answers, and I think he worked really hard researching this and talking to legislators about it in the past, and I think these guys are more informed than me. I'm kind of a Johnny-come-lately to this argument. I can't even honestly say that I've ever read Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. I'd like to think I've read the entire Constitution, but if I did, it was probably, maybe in civics class. So it's a steep learning curve about what these arguments are and what they mean, and there's smarter people out there than I that have been debating this for years. So I'll just kind of leave it to these folks.
Ms. Murray, tell us about your decision to go to the refuge, the last 4 people there leave. What made you decide to do that?
That wasn't on the agenda Wednesday when our flight was landing. I was landing in Portland, and Mike Arnold was picking me up so we can talk about who's incarcerated, who's their attorneys, what are the charges, and move forward with what's happening. But as the aircraft was hitting the tarmac, my phone, when you get into that zone and you can turn your phone on, was blowing up with one of our representatives from COWS, which was Matt Shea, with a phone number. Mike Arnold was calling me repeatedly, and so you guys have all been on airplanes, and they have, it was packed. I was in the last row, and so I answer the phone, and it's Mike Arnold, and he says, call the refuge right now, call the refuge, they're asking for you. There was some sort of online direct communication that was being aired, and I'm going to tell you something about that. David Fry, who's very smart, and Gavin, who put this together, the federal government literally shut down all communications for those poor at the refuge, so they could not call out for help. But at least they thought they shut it down. But we got those computer guys, those computer whizzes that can figure out hot spots and this spots and I don't know. And so David Fry, technical little whiz that he was, and another man figured out how to get communication out. And what happened was the FBI was moving in onto the refuge, and they were feeding live on a live stream, and they were basically demanding to speak to Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore. And at that time, as they were doing this, he was listening, and he actually alerted the FBI the day before I was coming in and said, Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore is coming to Oregon. She will be in Portland. Do you need her assistance? And they basically told him to fly a kite, and I think kind of not those words, but no. And so as I'm landing, my phone's blowing up. Mike Arnold is on the phone with the FBI. I got the phone number from Matt Shea, who's a Washington rep, on how to call into this phone number, and that phone number directly connected me to the refuge and how they were communicating. And so that's how I got involved.
How do you feel about your role in helping with not safe?
There was many people that played a role. I have to tell you, the role was as soon as I got off the plane with a dying battery, and Mike was looking for me. Mike got to me. We got in finally when we got to his truck, Mike was on the phone with the FBI. I was on the phone with Sean and Sandy and David and Jeff, and we were going back and forth as to what they want. And then he would tell the FBI what they want, and then the FBI would tell Mike, we can do this or we can do that, and then I would relay that.
I'm just curious how, in hindsight, it feels to have been a part.
You know what? I'm going to bring my mom and grandma card out right now because I am a mom, and it shows.
We heard it.
We heard it. And I'm really glad that they're safe. And I have to also give kudos to the FBI agents that were out there, because no one got hurt, no one got scratched. They allowed Reverend Franklin Graham and I to greet them and hug them and let them know that we were with them to this next battleground, which is our court service. And David Fry is 27. And I have a 26-year-old daughter. So I ask all of you, no matter what party you're with, is to never forget compassion and forgiveness to your fellow American, and never, ever deny someone when they reach out to you and ask you for help. So I'm very, very happy we are here today to talk about the lives that are still alive, and I will continue to free our people, because I do not think it's okay for Americans to be imprisoned or be prisoners for their political free speech. And that's why I'm here.
How about the fact that you're about
Yeah, how about that fact?
Oregonian
Yeah.
lawmakers? Do you consider yourself outsiders, and what do you say to those who feel you are?
You know what I say to those who would ever call another American an outsider? I'm an American, and if you call me from anywhere, I don't care if you call me from Syria, and if you're an American that needs help, Americans need to go and get their fellow Americans. That's it. Any other questions?
You previously told reporters that the 4 remaining occupants weren't part of the real movement and tried to distance them from Ammon Bundy.
I can't hear you.
You had previously, 3 weeks ago, called reporters trying to distance these remaining 4 occupants from Ammon Bundy, saying they weren't part of the real movement. So why embrace them now? What changed?
I have to totally disregard that false statement. I don't know where you're from or what you're trying to say, but those 4 are safe. They're on the refuge. So is there another question?
You're a hero, Michelle. We love you.
I love you too. I love you guys very much.
I'm gonna go see Ammon.
Thank you.
Ammon Bundy, February 12th, 2016. The Injustice System of America. The first time I met Stephen Hammond, I spent the entire afternoon with him on his ranch. We moved and fed cattle as we talked the whole afternoon. With all that was said about his ranch, abuse to his family, the challenges of the current system, the time he spent in federal prison for just ranching, with all that we talked about, one comment that Stephen made has stood out to me the most. He said, "I have been made to believe my entire life that most people in prison are bad, hardened criminals, dangerous to society. And then when I went into federal prison, I found out that it was packed clear full of people just like you and I." In the 17 days myself and the others have been in this misery of chains, I have met not one person that I felt was bad or that would hurt me. I am certain there are a few in here that will, but the fact is, these concrete walls are packed clear full of people longing for their families, mourning for the loss of their freedom, hurting for help, just needing a break in life. Many that are in here never hurt anyone or damaged anybody's property, but most are willing to say they are guilty just to be freed from the suffering and humiliation that are imposed upon them each day. I hear story after story how state and federal prosecutors are charging people for months and even years in prison for breaking a law that hurt or damaged no one. Then while in chains, these prosecutors dangle a plea agreement in front of them that lessens the sentence if they say they are guilty. Why else do Oregon prosecutors have a larger than 95% guilty rate in their prosecutions? It is a sickening game that bureaucrats and prosecutors play. It brings tremendous human suffering. I do not understand how anyone would find pleasure or success in causing human pain. For those who are not willing to play the plea game, they keep in prison for months, even years on end, before a trial date is even set. The entire time suffering for a crime they have not been found guilty of. We are so far from the justice system that was set up by our founding fathers. The justice system they set up was simple, just, restored the victim, and rehabilitated the offender. It was a similar system that was used in ancient Israel and by the Anglo-Saxons. They called it God's law, natural law, common law, as found in the Magna Carta and the U.S. Constitution. In common law, for a crime to have taken place, damage had to be done to another person or his property. There had to be a victim. Hence, habeas corpus, show me the victim. If there was a victim, and the two could not work it out themselves, then that person or his family could bring up charges. The accused offender would be tried by a jury of friends, peers. The jury would determine guilt and retribution. The victim was restored, and both moved on as free men. Very little government involvement. In fact, most were worked out between a church leader or a community leader. Very little need for jails or prisons. The injustice system we are now caught in allows bureaucrats in the name of the people to take up charges against a person when there is no victim. This system allows government officials to prosecute or to prescribe punishment, setting mandatory limits no matter the offense. 2, 3, 4 years in prison, taking voting rights and the right to bear arms for breaking bureaucratic law that damages no one and has no victims. With this cunningly crafted system in place, bureaucrats can now claim lands, homes, properties, resources, and entire industries as their own for their own growth and benefit. And anyone who challenges them, they send the officers to arrest that person. They punish and cause great suffering to them for several years. If that person finally sees the light of day, that person is broke and submissive, trained to never speak out, to keep the head low and to follow the flow. This is our current justice system, twisted for the growth and the protection of government, causing many innocent people to suffer in both body and spirit. Those in power would have us believe that society is the problem, that people are the reason the prisons are full, that America has nearly 3 times more people in prison than any other country because the American people are bad. This is a lie. Government officials, bureaucrats, enforcing their own laws upon the American people are the reason the prisons are full. They say they are protecting us, when in reality they are the grave danger. Dwight Hammond, Stephen Hammond, my father Cliven Bundy, my brother Ryan, my friends, and myself are all standing examples of this corrupt system that would have put away the likes of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, Sam Adams, James Madison, and so many other defenders of freedom if they were still alive today. O people of America, wake up, arise from your slumber, put off fear, trust in God, and unite to save liberty. Because of the oppressive actions that have come upon us, the American people must choose to act or they will be acted upon. As Americans, we have a great decision to make, freedom being very sweet or oppression being very bitter. For men not to act is a choice to be acted upon. Pray to the Lord and find out what you should do. We must not pass oppression onto our children. The time to act is now. Sincerely, Ammon Bundy.
And another spectacular report from John Baum. Now let's talk about the Bundy family and the Hammonds, the whole land rights situation. Regardless of what you think about these families, about their tactics, I want you to understand, looking at home, when you guys call these guys Al-Qaeda, they say that they're trying to overthrow the government and all that. It's not my view of these guys, especially Cliven Bundy, who's now being indicted on charges of conspiracy. They're charging these guys with everything from assault on a federal law enforcement officer, which to my knowledge never happened, use and carry of a firearm in relation to a crime of violence, and many other things as well. And they said he's spearheading a conspiracy against the United States government. Now, once again, regardless of what you think about these guys' tactics, at the Bundy Ranch situation where David Knight and Josh Owens were out there filming, to my knowledge, Cliven Bundy never assaulted anybody. They're saying that he was using a firearm in the commission of a violent crime. So I don't know how you can hit this guy with those charges. Once again, you like them, you hate them, you love their tactics or not. I think these are completely bogus charges against Cliven Bundy, and I'm sure many other people will be brought up on bogus charges as well. But the simple fact of carrying a firearm during a crime of violence, I don't understand how they could possibly charge these guys with such an offense when they weren't even committing violent acts. So we'll just have to watch and see how this story develops.
Hey everybody, Gavin Simon. I just want to give you a quick update talking about what happened on the ground on Thursday when David Fry went out. Because there's a few misconceptions, especially in the mainstream media about this, and it's really important that we keep straight. First of all, the key thing to understand is the FBI did not negotiate this out. The FBI, from the very beginning, were the criminals in all this. The FBI assassinated LaVoy Finicum. The FBI surrounded these guys and were trying to not negotiate, but to instigate violence there on Wednesday night. And we can hear this actually in the live call, where they're actually in the background trying to goad them, trying to get them to do some sort of knee-jerk reaction so they can get violence. Then what happened is the whole world started watching. And the world shined light on their wicked deeds. And people like this, corrupt government, our FBI, the state of our current government, our courts, they operate in darkness. They operate in secret. You know, they keep cameras away. They keep the truth away. They keep the media away. They work under cover of darkness. It's really important to understand what's happening. Okay? This is the stuff that dictatorial regimes do. And that's exactly what our government is doing, because we don't have a government of law and order or liberty. We have a government who is an open violation of the law, who's in active assault on the people. We have a government engaged in treason. Now, what happened then? You hear this call, and, you know, things aren't looking good, and we're trying to tell David, look, you need to be here to stand another day, right? And so it kind of goes quiet there at the end. We're all trying to figure out what to do, and David is on the phone talking in the background to the FBI. The media is trying to take that and spin it and say, oh, the FBI, they de-escalated, they negotiated. That's not what happened. And I've actually confirmed that. We can't fully hear it in the call, but we've confirmed it in the background what actually happened. And you had all the world watching this. See, suddenly, unlike the night before, the FBI wasn't going to try to goad them into a fight because they had public figures on the ground. They had Franklin Graham. They had Michelle Fiore. The world was watching what was going on. And so, in fact, the FBI, from the word we're getting from the ground, they were kind of losing it too. They didn't know how to fix the situation either at that point. And what actually happened is Ammon's attorney, Mike Arnold, was working in the background along with other people working in the background. But Ammon's attorney got a hold of Ammon. And Ammon put out a recorded message, and that was played back. Now, it's important to note that the FBI, this was not the FBI's doing. Ammon sent out this message, and we can confirm that because Nathan and I actually got that same message. Mr. Arnold was smart enough to put that out to multiple sources in hopes that it would get through. And so as you hear that call going in the background, and ultimately they play Ammon's message over that call in the background, and we were working on our end, getting that audio file loaded up, and it was just about queued and ready to go when they got the call through on the other end, and David Fry went out. And so the FBI gets no credit here. They're the criminals all along. And here is that final call that came through. And this is why I know it's true, because it landed in our inbox. And it also landed on the front line there and was played over that FBI phone. And this is what Ammon told David.
David, this is Ammon Bundy. I want you to know that there is a future out here, that you have a future. You've been valiant in your stand for your country and for your rights, and that your actions here really matter, and that we love you, and that, yeah, it will not be easy at first, but we know that the American people are going to stand with us. They're going to stand for your rights, for my rights, and that we're going to get this thing straightened out. And that you need to be part of this, even though it might be difficult for you for a few weeks. But we want you to be part of this. We know you have been valiant in your stand, and we ask you to do not take your life, and come here and let's work this together. And we know the American people are going to stand and make this right, and you have been a part of that. So please come out of there and let us work this out. And I love you very much, and thank you for your valiant efforts and cause to because you love your neighbor and because you love this land and you love freedom. And go through this with us. Thank you.
Wow. So that's what happened, folks. The FBI didn't negotiate them down. The FBI was never negotiating. The FBI was there committing terror on the people of Harney County, on the Patriots, just like they're down there doing right now. Because we have a lawless government. And so we need to make sure that we understand the narrative. The Patriots in Oregon were down there to love their neighbor. They were down there to be peacemakers, and that's what they did right up to the end. That's why the Final Four didn't want violence, even though they were willing to lay down their life for the cause. They weren't there for violence. They weren't there for hate. They were there to love their neighbor. They were there for liberty. And that's why Ammon was there, and that's the message that he's even sending out of jail right now. But we need to understand how lawless these courts are. And I actually spoke with Michelle, and she said that the next day she went into the courtroom down there, and she was just appalled. She was just appalled by what was happening in that courtroom. And you will be appalled too when you go into these courtrooms, and this goes all the way down to your local level. Guys, the rule of law is not existing in the courtrooms. Due process isn't existing in the courtrooms. It's not existing in our FBI, in our public agencies. The rule of law has been destroyed, and we have to step up to fix that. We have to take the stand. We have to be principled. And so, as for me, I'm going to put my appeal to heaven. I'm going to keep spreading the truth. I'm going to keep standing up for the truth. And I think we all need to do the same. We need to quit playing politics. We need to quit pretending that it's still mostly good, because it's not. And we need to support heroes like our Patriots in Oregon, like David Fry, who got the word out. And the media loves to spin people like David like, oh, they're crazy, and this is what Patriots are. No, David's not crazy. David loved his neighbor. David hates the abuse in this nation. And certainly David was under a lot of mental strain. You try being surrounded for weeks out in the winter cold by the same people that murdered your friend, and see how you respond. And so I'm so proud of the Patriots down there. I'm so proud that people are standing up. And I just wish more of America and more of our patriot groups. I wish we'd stop playing games and politics and worrying about getting reelected and worrying about what people think of us. Just start standing boldly for truth and liberty. Not getting distracted, not getting divided. We need to unite in liberty and stand up so that our children are not bound in the shackles of slaves. So that's what's happened at the end. There's, I'm sure, more stories to come, and hopefully we'll hear from more of the people like Michelle on more details. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of a fill-in at what really happened, how the situation was really resolved, and that the Patriots stepped up. They stood up for their own. They spread the message. They talked to their own. Right up to the end. And no blood was spilled. And in the end, the credit goes most of all to God. So we keep standing, we keep being principled, and we keep spreading the message of liberty.
It's very, very scary. In my opinion, worst case scenario, you're looking at a bunch of cowboys camping in the middle of nowhere at a refugees with what they're claiming to be federal property, which once upon a time was personal property, which I still haven't seen the legislative approval from Oregon that the federal government actually purchased the refuge. But on top of all of that, even let's say they did something wrong, you're looking at our folks are basically prisoners for their political free speech, and worst case scenario, civil disobedience, which is maybe a misdemeanor, which would be out on bail, which brings me to tears every time I think of this visual. Is you have an American FBI force team, and they're all, fully armed, and then you have two Americans, Sean and Sandy, a married couple, and they're holding hands. And so Sean's left hand is holding Sandy's right hand, and Sandy is, I believe, holding LaVoy Finicum's Bible in her left hand, and Sean in his right hand is holding the American flag up. And so they're walking up as a couple with the American flag, surrendering to American FBI agents for sticking up for fellow American ranchers, the Hammonds. And so when I look at that photo in my mind and I see our American law, basically pointing guns at our Americans for being American, it's really heartbreaking. And then they got Jeff to come out, and Jeff was holding a flag and his hand up. And they put him in cuffs, and they put him in another car, and they drove him up. So they let all three of them out, and Graham and I embraced them. And I want you to visualize all three of them were handcuffed with their hands in front of them. So when I approached Sandy, she lifted her hands up, so I kind of went under her arms, so then she could hug me like a bear hug because her hands were handcuffed. And I hugged her, and I told her I wouldn't leave her, and I told her I'd see her in court. Because that's our next battleground. And we did that with Sean and Jeff as well. And Graham, he's a big guy. So his hug totally engulfs your body.
Right.
So he hugged all of them. And then we all knelt down on the floor. And that's an image, there's an aerial image of that on the internet, and I'll email that to you.
Good. Okay.
Where you see Graham and I and those three kneeling down on the floor, and it was pretty powerful. Then now I'm not on the FBI phone with David Fry. You and Chris Ann was talking to David Fry from the live stream. All of a sudden, one of the FBI negotiators of the phone says, "Michelle, David Fry wants to talk to you. He's not coming out." So I get on the phone. I'm like, "David, what's going on?" And then we started talking to him about his grievances. And then since I had Sean and Sandy and Jeff right there, I put Sandy on the phone with David. And Sandy was, saying, "David, we're the Fabulous Four, and we made a pact. And they were really nice, and they weren't mean, and they were kind and gentle, and Michelle and Graham is here." And so Sandy spoke with him for a few minutes, and then we put the phone up to Sean's ear, and we put the phone up to Jeff's ear, and Graham spoke to him for a few minutes. And so as you and Chris Ann is talking to him live stream, the five of us are talking to him on the telephone, and at the same time, Mike Arnold and Shelley Shelton, John Moore, and Heather Scott, and Judy Boyles, and our other legislators are down at this place called the Narrows, listening in live stream. Well, Mike Arnold, I have to tell you, you got to meet that guy. It's Ammon Bundy's attorney, and the guy is like a superhero, energizer, just running everywhere. So Mike, runs to a phone, gets the prison guard to get Ammon on the phone, tells Ammon what's happening in like a minute, gets Ammon to record a message to David Fry. Then Mike runs up to like the first, block of cops, and he's like, "We got to get this message up there." Well, they don't do anything. So then Mike texts the message to the FBI guy that he was working with the night before, because the 4.5 or 5 hours, I don't even remember how long we were on the phone together, Gavin, you and I and the guys. But at the same time, Mike Arnold was on the phone with the FBI and negotiating and doing all of that, and then telling me what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do. So Mike texts that message. Mike Arnold texts Ammon Bundy's message to one of the negotiators, and the negotiator then gets it to Mark, either through Mark's phone or through another text message or whatever it was. So I'm talking to David a little bit more. We're going through his grievances. I'm basically explaining to him, my own personal story about why I have the same grievances. And then Mark, the negotiator, tells David Fry, something about a message. And I don't get to hear all the words from Ammon Bundy, but I know Ammon's voice.
Right.
And so he played that message, whatever it was, on the loudspeaker.
Right.
To David Fry.
Excellent.
And I want you to imagine how many hands that was in. I mean, Mike Arnold runs, gets Ammon on the phone from jail, records his message on his iPhone from another iPhone speaker. So he gets Lissa Casey, which is Ammon's other attorney. So they have their iPhone. One's on speaker, one's recording it. They get it to where it's recorded, and they get it recorded good enough to text it to the FBI guys, for the FBI guys to then play it on their speaker on the loudspeaker.
Well, and that's a powerful thing. Mike was really a dynamo, it sounds like, in the background. And well, we know that to be the case because not only was he doing that, he was also talking to us in the background, trying to get us the same file.
So this is Tony Shelton, Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton's husband, and Shelley Shelton, Tony Shelton, and John Moore, Assemblyman John Moore, were all driving in Tony's SUV. Going through Burns on Wednesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because they were meeting me in Portland Wednesday at 8 p.m.
Okay.
So now they're driving through Burns. And guess what happens to these elected officials at 2 p.m. in Burns before the FBI goes in and starts doing their shenanigans? Here's Tony.
So I'm driving along like I normally do at Nevada speeds. We have normal speeds from the 2000s in Nevada as opposed to the 1975 speeds that they have in Oregon. And so I got my first ticket in over 100,000 miles. And a couple of things to notice is when we got stopped, Gavin, we've learned a lot from your videos. The very first thing that we were asked was, where are you coming from? And I didn't answer. And the next thing was asked is, where are you going? Are you going into Burns? What's in Burns? And I said, I don't know. You live here. You tell me. And so I was not going to give any of that information out. I just gave him my.
This is yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
See, I wasn't going to give any information out, but John Moore thought that we could just be on our way. He told them we're two legislators from Nevada and we're coming up here to help with the negotiations. And I'm not sure what all he told him, but they knew that we were They knew that there were two elected officials from Nevada in the vehicle. So he gave me my ticket, my $270 ticket. It's my 270 and 100,000 miles, I can deal with that. But the one thing that I did notice, the very first thing he told me before he started talking was, I have to notify you that you are being recorded. That was the very first thing. And this was the Oregon State Police.
Right.
So the Oregon State Police has body cams.
Right.
So
right.
Where are they?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. Okay, continue.
So anyway, so they did have body cams. From there, we went and we gave John a tour. We had already been up there once, and so we gave John a tour of the area. So that John has 24 years in the military. He's been in Iraq. He's done lots of ambushes. So he said, I want to see everything involved. I want to know everything I want to know the layout of the land. So we drove around. We showed him. Most people don't understand this wildlife refuge is 30 miles from the town of Burns. And it's 30 miles of two long stretches of almost 15 miles each that have anywhere along the way, they could have stopped these guys anywhere along the way, but they chose the path that they took. And so John was very concerned as to why, as many times as they went in and out of the refuge, why did they choose to do this? Number one, where there's no cell signal. Number two, where there's no trees. Where there's all kinds of trees and things like that. And number three, where there wouldn't be any possibility of any media. So we showed him that. We took him up to where LaVoy was killed. We spent about 45 minutes of him walking around the area. And maybe you can talk to John to get a little more information on that. We end up going to Bend to meet with another 2 hours drive. In other words, we got to Bend at 2:30 in the morning and then had to set the alarm for 4:30 to get up and go behind the FBI with Michelle. The last thing Michelle told me before she left out with right behind the FBI car was, do not lose us, do not let us get separated. So we're driving this 2 hour drive from Bend to Burns, and they stopped for gas. We lost them for a minute because we were late taking off. We were trying to catch up with them, and next thing I know, we're miles, and we finally get a text from Michelle telling us what mile marker she's at, and we're actually miles and miles ahead of them at this point. So we stopped at a rest stop, waited for them to pass, and fell in behind them. They knew who we were, the FBI did, because they knew we were following, and they knew our vehicle. So we stepped in. So it was the FBI in a little small SUV or minivan. Then there was Michelle and the two attorneys in a pickup truck, and us, me, Shelley, and John Moore behind them. Well, we didn't follow along very long before they pulled off in front of us and ordered Michelle out of the pickup truck and into their car. And John Moore, we're on the phone with the Idaho representatives, and they're saying, don't let them take her away from you guys. You guys stick together. You're all working this together. And so John Moore gets out to run after him and tell him, no, you're not taking her. She's staying. We're all staying together. But he only got a few feet out of the car, and they took off. And they took off. They were driving 60 or 70 miles an hour the whole way, which we found kind of odd because they were late and they had an 8 a.m. Time they were supposed to be there. So next thing you know, they're driving 100 miles an hour. I think they were trying to lose us. But Mike, he's awesome. The attorney, he was right on their tail, and we were right on Mike's tail. So everybody's going 100 miles an hour, and then they go through a little town it's a 35 mile per hour zone, and they're going 85 through this town. So nice enough. The roads were long; you could see way in front of you, and we stayed with them all the way until they got to the airport. But it was a crazy ride. It was nerve-wracking because we had no idea what was actually going to happen here.
Thursday afternoon, we headed back to Portland to basically pick up where we were supposed to be the night before. Right. So we headed back to Portland, and we went and we visited with Ammon and Bundy. So myself and Mike Arnold and Lissa Casey went and did a contact visit with Ammon Bundy. We talked to him, and we told him what happened. And understand, Ammon was expecting us that Thursday morning in the jail. And instead, I want you to think about, put yourself in Ammon Bundy's shoes right now. So Ammon wakes up Thursday morning, puts, they have TV or the news because he's not in solitary anymore. He wakes up Thursday morning to his attorney and his assemblywoman is in Burns. The four that are at the refuge are coming out, and his father is in jail locked up. So he's like, what happened in 24 hours, because because his attorney spoke to him, and we were going to be meeting with him in the morning. None of this was happening. This was Thursday night. And then Friday, we go to the courtroom. Now, here's really the big kicker. We go to the courthouse. And, we go through, it's kind of just like going through an airport. You have to go through security. We get up to the courtroom. We're in courtroom 11B as in boy. This courtroom only seats 36 people. There's over 100 people in line to get into the courtroom. Now, Mike Arnold, the other legislators, we're probably number 50 or 53. We got there an hour early, and by the time the courtroom doors opened, there was over 100 people. Mike Arnold, the superhero again, goes to the front of the line and says, listen, I have Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore here. She promised these people that she would be here with them. Would anyone please give up their space in line just to make sure she gets in? And a woman did. There was this very nice lady, and she gave me her space in line. So at least the four that, I told them I'd be there for them would see me in court with them. And so when I got into the courtroom, I was so disappointed. Well, first of all, before I got into the courtroom, Gavin, I had to give the security my phone, and then they gave me a ticket. So I couldn't even have my phone in the courtroom to text or to let my legislators that couldn't get in the courtroom know what was happening. So there was zero communication in the courtroom. And I'm looking around the courtroom for cameras. So this way we can order, like the transcript and the video of what's happened. There's no cameras in the courtroom. There's no way of knowing what happened in that courtroom unless you were in the courtroom and you have a photographic memory to rewrite everything. And so I was disappointed in that. And so I got to see, the four, and then I got to hear a couple more that came out. And one really sticks out was this 25-year-old, and his name was Jeff Stanek. And and he served in the Army for 3 years, honorably discharged, just a cool, clean-cut kid, had an armed security job. He was supposed to be starting Wednesday. He's not even convicted yet, but he's not allowed to be on social media. I mean, all of the rules, and these are just fast notes that I was taking, all of the conditions that this guy, that they put on him, and he's not even convicted. And he can, now he can't have a job as an armed security, so now they're basically taking money away from him, and he's not convicted. He can't have firearms. He can't be in a home where there's firearms, and if there are firearms, they have to be locked in a safe. I mean, are we going to tell the intruder or bad guy, wait a second, let me open up my safe and get my shotgun? I mean, right. I was so hurt because every time I would hear the judge or the U.S. attorneys against Americans, that was another thing that just ripped my heart apart. We're in this federal courtroom, and it's the United States versus Americans.
Right. Absolutely.
It's just appalling.